In the recently released Epstein files, Marina's name appears in an email from a literary agent, John Bruckman, to Jeffrey Epstein. Bruckman wrote that he met Marina Abramovic, praised her work, and floated her as a high-value lecturer. A lot of viral posts then exaggerated this into claims about island rituals or deeper involvement, but she is not mentioned in connection with Epstein's island crimes. Marina Abramovic has been called the godmother of performance art, but the more accurate title is proof of concept. Not for art, exactly, for attention. There's a version of her story that lives on museum walls and in curatorial essays, and there's another version that lives online, where her name gets dragged through a fever swamp of occult panic, political paranoia, and the special kind of moral hysteria. The misunderstood part is not that she worked with blood, plenty of artists did. It's that she understood, earlier than most, that the public doesn't merely look at transgression, it collaborates with it, and then insists it was never there. If you only have 30 seconds, here's the bottom line of this video. Marina didn't become famous by merely shocking people. She became famous by making people complicit. Her secret was turning the oldest human thrill, permission, into a high-end spiritual experience, and then letting institutions and celebrities package that experience as culture. But if you'd like a bit more of an explanation, follow me.
Welcome. I'm Kira, and this is your beauty blueprint.
I've spent a whole week researching, watching, and editing all things Marina Abramovic to bring to you her essence and share the best of my findings. And I'm going to tell you something up front that will make this video feel different from the usual museum-friendly recap. Abramovic's persona isn't just an artistic identity. It's a deliberately engineered archetype that functions like an attraction. You don't simply watch her, you enter her. By the way, I'd like to just very briefly remind you of the t-shirt collection we have gathered by now. As always, they ship to and fro all over our little globe. I really do love to hear from you when you receive one. Big thanks to everyone who has already got one or is considering. It's a huge help for this channel, and it makes our bond that much more real. And stick around, because by the end of this video, I'll even serve up a quick breakdown of what we can learn, very practically speaking, from Marina Abramovic's unique self-presentation. Get comfortable. Pour yourself a tiny cup of Turkish coffee, the kind that feels like a ritual more than a beverage. And, if you want the most on-theme snack possible, keep dark chocolate nearby. Marina has described coffee as something her grandmother treated like fate, and she's also admitted chocolate is the sweet vice her friends push into her hands after punishing performances. If you're going to analyze a woman who treats endurance like a love language, you might as well eat like you're waiting for the curtain to rise. Here's a little backstory, and I'll keep it tight, because with Marina Abramovic, the biography only matters insofar as it explains the appetite. She was born on the 30th of November, 1946, in Belgrade, Serbia, in what was then Yugoslavia, former Balkan state. That makes her a Sagittarius, the zodiac's professional nomad. Is not evidence, but it fits the way her life keeps turning into pilgrimage. Her parents, Vojin Abramovic and Danica Rosic, were decorated partisans who later held privileged state roles under Josip Broz Tito. Her mother actually ran Belgrade's Museum of Art and the Revolution, and her father worked in state security. She was raised, for the most part, by a deeply religious grandmother. Candles, church rituals, the whole choreography of devotion, but then moved back under a home regime that reads like military training merely disguised as parenting. The infamous detail: her mother enforced a 10 p.m. curfew until Marina was 29. The less headline-friendly detail: that kind of control teaches a person to experience the body as a site of discipline first, and pleasure second, if at all. She studied painting at the Academy of Fine Arts in Belgrade and later at the Academy of Fine Arts in Zagreb, but she got bored with the polite limits of the canvas. By the early 70s, she'd moved into performance, into art that can't be owned, only witnessed, survived, and retold. The best art is a non-commodity, she said. You can't hang it over a sofa and call it a day. Her first marriage, to Nesha Paripovic, sits in the story like a quiet prelude. Important mostly because it shows the pattern. Personal life isn't separate from the work, it's raw material. She married, and yet she still lived under that curfew. Imagine trying to become a radical art star while racing the clock back to your childhood bedroom. Now, the breakthrough, and the reason her name still hits like a slap. In 1974, in Naples, she staged Rhythm Zero. She placed 72 objects on a table, some tender, some humiliating, some dangerous, including a gun and a single bullet, and announced that for 6 hours the audience could do whatever they wanted to her. She would remain passive, and they would bear no responsibility. It began with hesitation. It ended with her clothes cut off, her body violated, and at one point a gun moved toward her. Enough of a moment that other people in the room luckily intervened. Marina later described the performance as a confrontation with the idea that the public can kill you. Rhythm Zero is always summarized as shocking, but the real horror is simpler. It's plausible. Real. If you were in that room, 6 hours, no consequences, a human body offered up as an object, how far do you think you would go? Drop your honest answer in the comments. Oh, and if you like cultural analysis that doesn't flinch, please give this video a little like, subscribe, and share it with a friend who always says people are basically good. We're about to test that belief. So, in 1976, she moved to Amsterdam and met the love of her life, Ule. Their relationship lasted 12 years and worked like a myth with little production budget. Love, ego, endurance, and a vow to treat intimacy as an experiment. They performed together as a kind of two-headed organism, and the work asked an invasive question. Can identity even survive proximity? One of their most notorious pieces, Imponderabilia, forced visitors to squeeze between their two nude bodies in a doorway. Art as a human turnstile, entry as an overly intimate friction. But the point wasn't a nudity. The point was choice under pressure. Which body do you face? What do you do with your eyes? What does your politeness hide? Decades later, that same setup has returned in reperformances and sparked renewed debate about consent, safety, and what museums owe living bodies hired to hold the piece. Then there's rest energy. 4 minutes of mutual trust performed as a weapon. They leaned back, tensioning a bow. The arrow pointed at Marina's heart. Microphones captured their heartbeats ramping into panic. She has described it as forever. It's the kind of piece you can only make when your private life has already agreed to be public property. It was beautiful. Painfully beautiful. When they ended their story, they did it theatrically. Because of course they would. The lovers, the Great Wall walk. They started at opposite ends of the Great Wall of China and walked for 90 days to meet in the middle, embrace, and separate. It's a geographically staged breakup, a romantic ending written with many, many blisters. Now, on how she became the face of the art world, there's a reason Marina Abramovic is more than a respected artist. She's a recognizable figure, a silhouette, a face. But the mechanism is not mysterious. She built a persona that institutions could market even without fully understanding it. And she kept upgrading that persona as culture changed. In 2009, Art in America ran an interview that called her an art world diva. Language that sounds trashy until you realize it's accurate. Diva is not an insult, it's a kind of a job description. It names the mix, command, self-mythology, and the expectation that a room will reorganize itself around you. That same interview shows her thinking in categories. She spoke of artist bodyworks, public bodyworks, student bodyworks, like her life had become a taxonomy. Then came the canonization event, the 2010 retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art, where she performed The Artist is Present. A silent, motionless performance, day after day, for 3 months, for a total of 736 hours and 30 minutes. Visitors queued for hours to sit opposite her and hold her gaze for a while. Many cried. A piece with almost no action became a mass cultural object, because it offered what modern life withholds: undivided attention, with no small talk required. This is the moment she became a household name, not just an art historical reference. But here's the part people miss. She didn't go mainstream by softening. She went mainstream by refining. After Rhythm Zero, she understood the public's appetite for violence and humiliation. At MoMA, she flipped the switch and offered what she called unconditional love to strangers. Same stage, different weather. That pivot is not at all a contradiction. It's mastery. She learned how to conduct a crowd without even touching it. Once she proved the method worked in a museum atrium, celebrity culture did what it always does. It mirrored the ritual back at itself. Lady Gaga entered the Abramovic universe via the Abramovic method. Part endurance training, part spiritual branding, part art world initiation, filmed and discussed with the kind of pop avant-garde confusion that makes everything look like either genius or satire, depending on your mood. Then Jay-Z performed Picasso Baby for 6 hours in a gallery, explicitly inspired by the MoMA setup. So he turned that infamous one-on-one encounter Marina came up with into a hip-hop spectacle.
Can you turn it up a little more?
Later, there was a messier footnote involving a promised donation to her institute and public back and forth that ended in a clarification and apology from her organization. Exactly the kind of administrative drama that happens when performance art collides with spreadsheets. And in 2024, at Glastonbury Festival, she led a stadium-scale silence for peace. 7 minutes of collective stillness, framed as an intervention in energy and violence, and she was wearing a custom robe designed by Riccardo Tisci while at it. But the message was classic Abramovic. Presence as ethics, aesthetics as a delivery system. This is how she became the face of modern art and provocation. She made presence legible, reproducible, and portable, from hardcore performance rooms to pop. She built a ritual all people could recognize, even when the content changed. Now, the persona is an archetype and why it works. Abramovic once joked, while also being completely serious, that there are 3 Marinas: warrior Marina, spiritual Marina, and bullshit Marina. The last one being the celebrity-loving, man-gossiping, self-mocking version. It's funny, but it's also a blueprint for public survival. Split the self into functions so the public can never exploit you. If you map her onto Jungian psychology, she reads less like the muse archetype and more like the structure that produces muses: the shaman, the warrior, the trickster. The shaman part is obvious. Ritual, fasting, endurance, altered states, and the belief that art can transmit something immaterial. The warrior part is equally obvious. She treats pain as training, not tragedy. And the trickster part is actually where the glamour lives. She understands how to provoke the public into revealing itself, then walks away so the audience has to sit with what it did. Now, let's bring in my favorite cultural critic, Camille Paglia. Not because she wrote a neat little essay about Marina Abramovic. She didn't, but because Camille Paglia's framework helps explain why Abramovic lens is both erotic and terrifying. In Sexual Personae, Camille Paglia argues Western culture oscillates between Apollonian order, structure, clarity, the clean line, and Dionysian or chthonic forces. Nature, sex, chaos, the body's mess. Marina's early work drags the Dionysian onto the gallery floor. Blood, vulnerability, humiliation, the threat of death. But her late, hyper-controlled works, the silent sit, the minimalist staging, are pure Apollonian geometry used to summon emotional collapse in others. She doesn't choose one. She weaponizes the tension between them. Yes, tension. That's the juice of life. This is why she's unusually useful as an aesthetic and psychological blueprint for self-styling, especially for women who are tired of being told to be relatable. Marina's power is not prettiness. It's containment. She teaches a deeply practical principle. If you control your attention, you control the room. Not with chatter. Certainly not with apology. But with a calibrated refusal to perform normal femininity and demand. And here's the critique angle you're allowed to say out loud. That same persona that liberated her, well, it also sells. The Abramovic method becomes a brand. The brand becomes products. And suddenly, the woman whose best art was non-commodity is also offering a high-end route to glow. That is the cost of being famous in late capitalism. I mean, when a woman builds power through discipline and spectacle, is she freeing herself or just giving the system a sexier cage? Please tell me what you think in the comments. And of course, if you want more of these conversations, consider becoming a channel member for members-only podcast episodes. To the members already here, thank you. You're keeping this temple lit. Now we deal with the scandal that follows her like smoke, and this is what it all comes back to, because it's the most misunderstood part of her public life. In 1996, Marina Abramovic made Spirit Cooking, text that reads like surreal ritual recipes, painted in blood in a gallery context. Decades later, the phrase spirit cooking escaped the art world and got pulled into political paranoia after leaked emails referenced a spirit cooking dinner. From there, conspiracy theorists treated conceptual art as literal evidence of satanic rituals. Marina received harassment and threats. She had to publicly insist, "I'm an artist, I'm not a Satanist," and explained that the internet had simply found a symbol set, which it eagerly twisted into a villain story. Then in 2020, Microsoft pulled an advertisement featuring her after online outcry recycled those accusations. That's just proof that misinformation doesn't need novelty or facts. It needs repetition. The story is grotesque, but it's also instructive. Marina's imagery works because it's archetypal. Blood, stars, bodies, ritual. And archetypal imagery is exactly what conspiracy culture feeds on. If you're wondering why she was such an easy target, look at the visuals. Long dark hair, severe wardrobe, blood motifs, the star symbolism from her communist youth, performances that flirt with death. It's not that she invited conspiracy, it's that the aesthetic is strong enough to be stolen and scandalized. But not all scandal around Marina Abramovic is the internet being deranged. Some of it is ordinary, human, and frankly more revealing. Her former lover collaborator Ole sued her over royalties and credit for their joint works. A Dutch court ordered her to pay him €250,000 and affirmed requirements around attribution. The ugliness here isn't that artists fight, it's that love stories become ledgers. And yet, the audience still wants the rom-com ending. And then there was also fallout around the re-performances. The people hired to reenact endurance pieces have their own limits, negotiations, and grievances. And the museum context doesn't magically make that disappear. Not everyone can do what Marina did, physically and emotionally speaking. A 2011 account by re-performers described the demanding conditions and long negotiations for better pay and protections. Years later, a lawsuit by a nude performer in the MoMA show alleged repeated sexual assaults by visitors and accused the museum of failing to protect performers adequately. Marina Abramovic was not named in that suit, but the story underlines a brutal truth. When art uses the body as a doorway, institutions must protect that body. And then there's the money scandal that hits differently just because it's so mundane. Marina Abramovic raised significant funds for the Kickstarter campaign connected to the Marina Abramovic Institute building in upstate New York. Later, the building project was scrapped, and criticism erupted over refunds and where the money went. Marina's response, echoed in multiple reports, was that the Kickstarter was for design and feasibility work. Design-related payments were cited as a major expense. The controversy here is almost disappointingly normal. Art world ambition meets construction reality, and donors realize vision is not an easily dependably deliverable product. Finally, there are personal controversies that show how fame turns a woman's body into public property. In 2016, Abramovic referenced having had 3 abortions, and expressed anger at the way people framed it as for art. Whether you agree with her choices is irrelevant. The point is the cultural reflex. Women's reproductive decisions get treated as public debate, while male genius remains conveniently childless. This is the scandal pattern in summary. People fear her, then they moralize her, then they try to own and punish her, often for the exact qualities they secretly came to consume. Now, for the part I promised, the quick, practical, useful to us tool breakdown. Not how to look like Marina, because that's Halloween. This is how to borrow the intelligence of the look. Marina Abramovic's signature is built around one high-contrast decision: black hair plus red lipstick. When asked what she'd do with 5 minutes to get ready, she answered simply, red lipstick. She's also pushed back against the idea that fashion makes you unserious, saying she loves fashion, and questioning who made the rule that red lips disqualify you as an artist. Her hair is an argument, black, straight, often center-parted, severe enough to read as a line drawn down the skull. She's said she's been dyeing it since 24, after parts turned grey overnight. That makes her black hair feel less like vanity and more like armor. Second lesson, pick a repeatable structure. People think charisma is mysterious, but it's often consistency. She's now leaned into wellness publicly. She launched the Marina Abramovic Longevity Method, skincare brand developed with Nonna Brenner, which includes a face lotion priced around £199 and botanical drops around £99. Criticism has framed it as commodification. Marina frames it as philosophy and longevity. Now, the third lesson, and this is the grown-up one, decide what you're selling. If it's not products, it's still something. Mystique, taste, clean girl, femme fatale, soft life. Well, Marina Abramovic sells heavy presents. If you want to recreate the dark Abramovic look in a wearable way, do it like this. Keep the base honest and easy, skin that looks like skin, brows not overbuilt, eyes not noisy. Then make the red mouth the event. If you're not a red lip person, pick your own equivalent. A black liner, a single piece of jewelry, a perfume you never compromise on. Marina once said she wanted to invent a scent that smelled like lightning after storm, called insomnia. That's not just about beauty, it's branding. Now, style-wise, she stays in a tight palette, black, red, white, because it photographs like a symbol. In a culture that teaches women to be visually easy, her look is deliberately not easy. It's formal, it's a little dangerous, it reads expensive even when it's simple. Use that. When you want authority, reduce your palette and sharpen up your lines. And finally, the psychological takeaways, the real blueprint. Marina Abramovic repeats versions of the same principle across interviews. Go toward what frightens you. She said she only does something if she's afraid of it, because that's the point. Her advice is not be fearless. It's more precise. Treat fear as a compass and treat discipline as the price of admission. Practice staying with yourself long enough that you become difficult to manipulate. That's the kind of power no one can take away from you. Marina Abramovic's work can seem ugly, but the scandal isn't that she used her body. The scandal is that she showed how eagerly the world will use yours, unless you decide with dominating clarity that it belongs to you. I've queued up the next chapter for you here. I'll see you soon. Love, Kira. Now go create your own blueprint.
Did you have a good time?